Hi, Anna Meyer here again with some more world machine texturing. The previous video ended with this. We had an island that had some basic features, and we got the highlands colored, and we got some erosion, a beach, and all this was created using selectors, elevation data, erosion data, or mask data from in this case coastal erosion. And I've talked about different methods of blending things like add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and so on and so forth. And we used selectors, and you can mask a selector and you can blend them together, and that way we created the base colors, we created erosion colors on the slopes here, and we had highlands, and we added a beach mask. Now we're going to bring it one step further, and like a good cooking show, I've already made it, because otherwise I would screw this up more than I normally do. This is like take 6 or take 7, so we'll see if this makes it. So the next step here is we're going to make it into look like this, and I'm going to build it because this is a small file. So here we go. And this is something, it's not perfect looking by any means, but this has all the features that I normally use in production maps, like the islands, Midgard, etc. And we use a bunch of other little nifty tricks to get the final look. And the first one is, in order to create the seamless or kind of smooth transition of ocean colors, we use a colorizer. And in this case, we only want to have the gradient covering from ocean level, meaning from 375 meters down to 0 meters. And the whole range of elevation data is from 8,000 meters to 0 meters. And that means that we will only work with a little end here or a little bit at that end, depending on which way you put it. And that is kind of tedious to put a lot of stuff in here and then just leave the rest of it unused. So in order to make it easier to work in the colorizer, you can use a clamp device. And you take the elevation data and pipe it into a clamp, and then you use expand, and you put expand from 0 meters to 375 meters, and expand that and press OK. That means that we take in those 375 meters, the bottom ones, and we expanded that to cover the whole range, and therefore you get a much easier working situation inside the colorizer. And that also means that the colorizer you can make sure you can get a whole way more number of colors from that area. It looks much smoother, much easier. I think theoretically it's probably possible to solve it anyway, but it's much easier to make a good gradient when you need one. So that's the first step in this. And I've also color coded the groups here. By double clicking on the group, you can go in here and you can pick colors. That's really handy in order to make when you have a large when this starts to look like a motherboard with hundreds of devices and dozens of groups and stuff, it's always good to color code it so you know what data this group is actually about. And the next stage here is to actually use the base colors, and the base colors here is for the basic landscape colors. And in this case, I've decided to use a pre-made texture map, and that could be an aerial photo. You can dabble yourself in GIMP or Photoshop, or you can use specialized software like FilterForge or something to actually create grassy textures, to create agricultural landscape, or a whole bunch of things, or just a blend of colors that you think are appropriate, like sandy colors for a desert, or just various green, yellowy for a savanna landscape, for instance. And then you use the file input device, and you load in the file you want from any file you have on your hard drive, and you click interpret as RGB, meaning red, green, and blue. So it's otherwise World Machine will try and interpret it as elevation data, but in this case we want the color data. So you click that one and you set the width of the thing, and that depends on, you have to have an idea of how large the overall map is, which I now forgot so we can check and see how large the overall map is. The overall map is 20 kilometers in this case. So then when I go in here, I set the first one to 6, meaning I get the larger areas, bits of it varies over time, so to speak, or over distance, not sorry, over areas. So you get some areas are greener than others, and then we can actually look at what the texture looks like by pressing F. This is what the texture looks like. So it's a blend of various greens with a little bit of kind of brownish, yellowish here and there. And you can see that this one repeats now because it's set to be 6. So each texture is about this, and then they repeat over time. And that's one of the problems with textures, is that no matter how large, they repeat. And that's what you set that up here. So outside behavior is tile. You can have blank like this, you only see one, or you can repeat edge values like this, or you can tile it like this, or you can actually mirror it. Mirror kind of works well too in some instances, but in this case I'm going to use tiles. You simply keep repeating it indefinitely, and then you set X, Y, where it starts doesn't really matter in this case. It's the size of the thing, and preserve aspect ratio doesn't really is necessary, but just keep it. So in this case I put 6 kilometers, but you see this will look repetitive. If you look at the whole map, you will start seeing the same thing repeated over and over again. So what I did was that here, this one is called grass 1. And what I did in order to take some of that away is that I take another one that is called green 3, and we can take a look at what that one looked. And that one looks like this. And they're kind of similar in color, and for this to work you need similar looking textures, but they can work together. And so I've taken this one and I use a slightly larger scale, so 11, and then I use the same setting, so the rest of it is the same. And then I simply use average, so I just blend the two together. And if we look at this, then we can see here we get a kind of a mush of the two here, and I can blend up and down. You can see like this if I go that way, so you can go roughly halfway. And you can even sometimes use the same image, and you just take one at 6 kilometers and you take another one at 11. I can use the same, that way I blend away that repetitive effect, so to speak. So that way I can create large areas with lots of variation without having to work within World Machine. The problem with this that you get files that you need in order to recreate the terrain. So if you send the World Machine file to someone else to render it, you have to send these files with it, and these are also dependent on the where you find it. So you might have to remap the where you find the files. That's another issue that you have to think about. And here I just use a regular chooser because I just want ocean colors, or I want the base colors of the terrain. There is like no blending. I want one or the other. So then the chooser is a good example. And then I use the selector to simply select everything above 375 meters should be base color, and everything under should be ocean color. And then when we go to the features of the landscape, we want them to stand out from the basic colors that we used the texture maps for. And in order to do that, we're going to not use images, but we're going to use World Machine's built-in fractals, because fractals are the things that you use in order to create the terrain that creates the mountains, the hills, and all that stuff that you can that forms the landscape. Or you use fractal devices of various. They're basics, advanced, they're Voronoi, etc. And you can use them to generate not elevation but color. So I take an advanced Perlin that is simply just a whole bunch of very narrow peaks like this, and I take another one that is more kind of blunt, blobby peaks, and I feed them through a chooser, and I use basically the same thing just to get variation. And then I use various green, brown kind of colors, just bland, not that distinct, just so you get that kind of variation of green, yellowish, brownish of a general temperate or seasonal landscape. And then I feed that elevation data in here. And if we look at it here, we should be able to see something, but no, we don't. So sometimes the world machine is a little bit tricky that way. So if we look at it here, you see you don't get any. So we look here and we go in here and then we build it again. And now this is kind of typical. That happens at times. So we'll see if we can solve it here. This is kind of good that it happens. Yep, and there we go. And now we go in here and we'll see if we can look at the colors here, and they kind of disappear, and there you see we have a bug. So we go back to the beginning here again, and then I go in here. We go here and we go here, and we have something here that, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So sometimes World Machine can be a little bit finicky, and you can end up with stuff like this all of a sudden. And if you don't want to kind of keep struggling like I did for a minute or two here, then you can actually just save it, close it, open it up again, because that kind of renews it and refresh all the data flow through. But it happens from some time to time, so don't worry about it too much. And now I'm going to test my luck here again and see. Yes, there we are. And because I wanted to show what it looks like. And this is a fractal. It very much like the file textures we used from a file. But the good thing with this is that this is truly seamless. This you will have, it looks similar, but there you can almost, if you have enough, like you have two different fractals, just like the files, this one is 192 meters and this one is 500 meters. That means that they work in a different scale, and that means that there's almost infinite variety. This textures done using fractals are basically seamless, inevitable, forever in every direction. So this is a perfect way both to get a small file, you have no dependencies, no files that you need to send with it, and you can mix an enormous amount of colors in various forms. And if you want to really be, I'm only using one or like two different fractals mixed across every 500 meters or so. And here, if you look at the scale here, if I change the scale, in this case you didn't see much difference. So we'll see like this. Here you can see the difference if I change, and you can change the steepness here, and then we change it like this. You can see it's kind of hard to see the difference, but if I go like here, and you can see the difference here, you put in extra small tiny disturbances here and there, so to speak, but you can change some of the basics here. If we go up here, you see you can zoom in and out here, you get variation, and you almost get like Moire effects, or I'm not really sure how to pronounce that in English, but here you can see we can kind of zoom in and out and you get effects like this. So this is how you can work with it. You can you can tweak it, and you can introduce Voronoi, you can introduce many different ones, you can blend one to another, etc. And therefore you can get truly like lifelike variation that varies enormously over vast distances. And this is one of the things, once you figured out a few of these, you can actually store them as macros, or you can simply have them as a number of devices, copy them in, and therefore you can have like basic savanna texture, you can have basic forests, or whatever it is, and just use them. So in this case, we used the base colors were texture maps, and then we add erosion texture in the form of fractals. And then we use, just like in the previous example, we use flow data and we use wear data, and we blend the base colors from the textures with the colors from the fractals. And in this case, I've chosen very similar colors. They are basically the same type of greens and slightly yellowish, brownish all over the landscape. And then I've added here a more kind of brown, more like dirt or soil-like, and I've added that on top. And if you think that's a little bit too much, and this is multiply, you can just add, and if you think it's too much like that, you can just take average and it becomes more kind of brownish color that way, and we can use that. And then I have highlands just like I had before. And then we can look at the final, but now maybe I look like the multiply here. So we can use it like that. And here we have the final island. So this is a way you can add fractal data, you can add texture maps that you already have somewhere, or you created in Photoshop, or you used some sort of texture software. There are plenty of wonderful sites on the internet where you can get texture maps that are seamless already. But World Machine has that. To use fractals has a lot of advantage because it's very simple to load. There's no loading time, so you just generate them when you build, and you have no dependencies. Meaning, if you don't use any texture maps or source maps, all the data is generated in it, and you can even email a small file to someone. So even an enormous world would just be a small file, a few megabytes in size. So that's one of the advantages. The drawback is that you have to actually sit and figure it out. If you steal a good texture map or borrow it from the internet somewhere, and you can build it into your own design. So now I'm going to build it, and here we have our final island. So this was the kind of a show to see that how we could add more variety and make it look a bit more natural. Because if you look at the island, things are very similar, just like in nature, but they're not absolutely the same. There's no area that looks exactly the same as the other one. So you get a very little repetitiveness, and still it looks very similar, like it's the same environment. And then in order to make a larger world, then you have to make several different ones. This might be like seasonal plains, and then you have another one for more forested areas, and you have another one for dry prairie, and a fourth one for desert, etc., etc. And you blend them one to the other, and you can start using it. And if you start using 5 or maybe even 10 or maybe even 20 different sets of this, then you can create even a continental map that looks very believable. So okay, so thank you so much for watching, and I will be back soon with a video that will be, we will both look into Photoshop and layering and take care of the data we put out of World Machine. But before then, I'm going to show you a little bit of a large terrain setup. And okay, so thank you so much for watching, and good night.